welcome to Unity in the Community. My name is Ernie Floyd. The Unity in the Community show embraces city versus diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. And in this edition of Unity in the Community, it's going to be a little bit of a different twist here. I'm excited to have this conversation because I think that once you understand the person I'm going to introduce and also the nature of their business, you may not look at it the same again in the future of that nature. Joining us now is the owner of Empire Loan. His name is Michael Goldstein. Welcome to Unity in the Community.
Thank you, Ernie. Pleasure to be here.
And thank you for being here because everyone knows the jingle, everyone knows the songs, everyone knows the when it comes on and stuff like that. But I never thought I would get the chance or opportunity to actually speak to the person who created Empire Loan.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, and I do like that people know the jingle. That's great to know.
But the marketing is working. Okay?
Oh, thanks.
And I'm into marketing and advertising myself, so like that. So we're here to talk about a number of different things, and I like the fact that you're here to talk about Empire Loan because it relates to, obviously, naturally, your business, and also it relates to the economy, and it also relates to the people in the community. And there's an association around the whole thing, and you have it down to a formula in reference to also not only your business wins, but also the patrons could win. And also you have a foundation we're going to talk about a little bit later on and how the community wins.
Sure.
It's kind of like the win-win-win, right?
Yeah, well, it's, you know, we always wanted to, when I started in 1985, we absolutely made a commitment that some percentage of what we do is going to go back to the communities that we serve. And I wouldn't have even gotten into this if I wasn't going to have some aspect of it go back to the communities for sure.
Yeah. So before you got into the business and thought about it, because you're third generation now
on
operating, congratulations. And that in itself is a science, and that in itself is something to talk about because back in the day, once again, I always say back in the day, when it comes to reflecting in the past and the nature of how people ran businesses, especially with families, it was always thought that the person who started the business, the family would work in that business, and then when that person retires, the next person steps up and they get involved in the business, and the next person, next person. So that's when you have that generational
wealth.
Wealth, yeah. Like that nature. So prior to getting involved with Empire Loan, what was happening with you, and where were you born and raised, by the way?
So I'm from New Rochelle, New York.
Oh, okay.
And my family are pawnbrokers in the Bronx. So my grandfather, it's a complicated story, but my grandfather essentially started the pawn shop in the Bronx. It was called Willis Pawnbrokers back in the 40s. My father took over that store from him. I wound up leaving New York and coming up to Boston, and through a number of different circumstances, I wound up opening up my own pawn shop called Empire Loan in 1985. So even though there is a family connection and I am a third generation in the pawnbroking world, Empire isn't part of my family's business from the Bronx, but I absolutely recognize what I learned from my grandfather and my father, and a great uncle that also worked there, and it was instrumental in me starting the store. Now, I came up to Boston, went to Emerson, have a film degree, never worked in film, and I just had an opportunity to do this, and it was something that I knew, and we picked it up in 1985.
Yeah, Emerson's a very good school too, as well.
Well, I will say, kind of tongue in cheek, it is a much better school now than it was when I went there. It was, but I loved it. I loved my experience there. And I'm very happy for being in Boston. I fell in love with Boston right away.
Yeah, I'm from Roxbury, so I'm familiar with Emerson. I went to high school right around the corner from there. Busy and bustling at that particular time. Never went to the school. Some of my friends did, but you're right. What it was back then and what it is now, it's huge. It's incredible what they're doing over there as well. All right, so you went to school, and like some people, they decide that okay, you're going for communications in your sense, marketing, we'll say. And then, because it involves communications and marketing, which you do too as well, by the way.
Sure.
So you didn't stray too far.
Well, if I can just say, mostly what I studied at Emerson, the two kind of areas was radio and film. And my radio course, one of the things, this was before Jordan's Furniture was doing the Brothers. One of the classes said, if you're a small enough business and your voice can be the voice of, the product, you will look to the community as someone who's a celebrity. But I know I'm really not. Having said that, when I've done my TV and I've done my radio, when I go to, things in Boston, this is in the past, we don't do as much radio and TV advertising now. People say, oh, that's Mike. That's Mike from Empire. So I'm a kind of a big fish in a very, very small pond. And that was a little bit of training from Emerson.
And also the fact that you're consistent too. So you're in front of the people and you're consistent. You have a unique voice, have that unique jingle. How did you put the whole package together?
Well, I'd be remiss in not saying that it was an advertising agency that we used, and they did a great job. We came up with the jingle. It was funny when my youngest daughter was in, I think, 4th grade. they had to do something where they took a historical story and put it to a jingle or some sort of music. And in her class, because they knew that I was her father, they put it to the Empire Loan jingle. They had, so I thought that was kind of cute. But yeah, consistency is very important. It's repetition. It's front of mind. So right now, when we do advertising, we're not necessarily looking specifically for new customers, but we want to be front of mind so that if somebody needs our services, oh, Empire, they'll remember Empire.
So you came out of college with the marketing degree.
Yeah.
And you decide to either work for somebody or work for yourself. So what went first?
Well, I graduated with a film degree and I wanted to work in film. And as it turns out, it's really hard making a living in Boston. So I was doing my, production assistant gigs here and there, and it really wasn't as consistent as the landlord asking for rent. And the truth is, I'm really not an artist. I love film, but I was not going to starve for my art.
Of course.
Had I been someone who was an artist, I would have said, okay, I got to get out of here. I've got to go to LA. So an opportunity arose from a particular pawn shop retiring. And I met up with my first partner many years ago, and we said, look, let's do this for now. And frankly, I say it all the time. It was the path of least resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And we did it. And so far, knock on wood, it's been good.
All right. So when you got into it, you said, I'm familiar with this.
Yes.
This is interesting because of the history, as you mentioned earlier, because of your family. Once again, you listen to Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. And the Unity in the Community show embraces the city versus diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. And joining us is Michael Goldstein. He's the owner, operator, president of Empire Loan, and there's a number of locations that we're going to mention in a second. So let's get in this dichotomy of your background and how it all started, because I want people to hear that if they're listening and they're interested in starting their own business, if they're listening and they're going to college and whatever case may be, this reinforces that things are possible.
Sure. One of the things I tell young entrepreneurs who haven't necessarily started something yet, and I'm not talking about the larger kind of internet startups, I'm talking about kind of the brick and mortar, something that somebody wants to do. I always say, don't let the little details get in the way of doing something. So sometimes I hear, I was going to do it, but there was all these legal impediments. And I say, just do it. Let the accountants and the lawyers sort it out later. Now that's very glib. What I mean is just don't get caught up in the details. If you've got an idea to open up a cupcake store, of course you have to get your certain licensing, but just don't get bogged down with the details. Get your space, get your formulas, and just do it. Put your shingle out. Now, a lot of the world doesn't operate on brick and mortar anymore, so it's a little bit different than when I started in '85. But I still think that sometimes people get bogged down with the details and it blocks them. They let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah, those emotions can go like a roller coaster, right? Whereas the fact that at first you may get excited about something because it's something that you may like, and all of a sudden somebody pats you on the back and says, "Hey," and you share it with somebody, and they say, "I think you should do that." And before you know it, as they're talking themselves into it, that actually at the end, it seems as though they're talking themselves out of it. Why do we get so excited initially in the beginning, and then all of a sudden later on, as we get closer to the possibility of making it happen, and all of a sudden we talk ourselves out of something?
Well, the only thing I can say is sometimes those details, again, seem daunting. Sometimes it's nice to have people that encourage you when you say you've got this great idea, but just as often, probably, I'll use the donut example or the cupcake example. You may have one or two people say, wow, that's a great idea. We haven't had a cupcake store, but you might have 5 or 6 people saying, what are you talking about? I mean, you can go to this, they'll give you reasons why not to do it. And if you really believe in something, you have to kind of cut through that as well. Now, that doesn't mean don't take good advice.
Of course.
You can take good advice, but try to get it from people that aren't going to step on your dream, but give you realistic expectations. And look, a lot of people that are at the top, they failed multiple times to get there. And you have to kind of be tough-skinned and know it may not succeed the first time. It may not succeed the second time, but just keep plugging away.
Yeah. And what's funny about that too is when you see this, as you mentioned, successful people, right? When you see that successful person, it's the same person saying, you know something, I admire that person. I wish I could have been there. That could have been me. In some sense, it could have been you, but you decided not to do it. But at the same time, when you see the successful people, sometimes you don't hear the success or their failure rate before they became successful. And that other person who's looking at that other person could have been successful themselves,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
So you partner with a particular individual. And then what was the location, the first location?
First location was 1260 Washington Street in Boston. We happened to move 5 years later, just up the street.
Sure.
So we say our first location was on Washington Street in Boston in the South End. Actually, you're an old Boston guy.
Yeah.
You know Harry the Greeks?
I sure do.
Right across the street from Harry the
Yeah.
Greeks was the Premier Deli.
Mhm.
And that's where we wound up opening up. When we moved there to the Premier Deli. Harry the Greeks was across the street. I was good friends with Muncie. And yeah, that was back in the day.
Yeah. And how big was the space at that time?
Same as it is now. I think that space is 3,200 square feet altogether. Yeah.
So is that by a science that you wanted to be 3,200 versus 2,200 versus 1,200?
No, not really. It was really what was available. So we were moving from one location, which was very small, probably 13 or 1,400 square feet. We knew we needed something bigger. The space that we wound up in, which was about 3,300 square feet, seemed to be right. If the only space that was available was 15,000 square feet, we wouldn't have taken it because it would, but it just lucked out. It was a, the right size. Now, as we go into the suburbs, we do have a formula. As we've opened up in these other locations, we like it to be a certain square footage, usually less than 3,300 square feet, but that's, depends on the community.
So when you open up the store, the gentleman was leaving and you're coming in. And what's the makeup? What do you decide that's going to be something to begin to start the business as far as the items go?
Well, before you said as far as the items go, because that's been standard across the board.
It is? Okay.
Yeah. So we mostly, for most of our 40 years, celebrated 40 years in 2025. Thank you.
There you go.
It was almost entirely jewelry. Not entirely, but mostly jewelry. It's an easy thing to lend money on. It's an easy thing to kind of appraise and get loans. But we, from the beginning, we would take in TVs, some musical instruments, guitars. We would take in tools. These types of things we would take in, and we still do. It's a smaller part of our business. But outside of the merchandise that we took in, when I opened up in 1985, I said to my employees, I had 2 employees, my partner and 2 other employees. And I said, here's what we're going to do. Now, don't forget, I grew up in this with my grandfather and father.
Of course.
And I grew up in an environment in the Bronx store that my father, who I loved, and my grandfather and the people that worked for him, it was a much more adversarial relationship with the customer. And I said, we're not going to do that. I can go into detail, but I said, when we offer money to someone on a piece of merchandise, when that money isn't enough for them and they're angry, we're not going to push back on that anger. We're going to try to explain how we came up with that number, because it is a formula, and we're going to try to sell the loan. And if somebody doesn't want to do it, that's fine. We said, we're not going to allow people to, be verbally abusive, but we're going to try. We met people the way every business should meet customers, by speaking, never looking down our nose, always trying to explain why we're going to do it. And this is something that you may or may not appreciate. I told my first 2 employees, if I ever hear someone refer to our customers as these people, they're going to lose their job. I grew up in an environment where my father and grandfather and the pawnbrokers that worked for them referred to the customers as these people. And believe me when I say, these people, they didn't look like me. They looked more like you, Ernie. And I grew up hearing this, and I said, we are not using that language. Our customers are not these people. Everybody's different. They're just like the people that go into the bank and the coffee shop. So that was something that was very important to me, to not categorize everybody as like these people.
And that's important. And that's why I invited you to come on Unity in the Community, because this is about the people. And at the same time, as we all know, loans come with, pawn shops come with the stigma.
They do.
Okay, they come with the stigma. And I want to find out, when we come back, why it was so important for you. And I know why, but I want to elaborate even further, that the fact that it's a business and you want to treat the people with respect, and at the same time, they treat you with respect. And we know the nature of the pawn business can come with this negative connotation, but you want to skew away from that. We're going to further have that conversation. And also, we're going to talk about how you play a role in the community as well with your business, okay? Excellent. Thank you. When you come back, listen to Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd, and joining us is Michael Goldstein. He's the owner of Empire Loan, and he's joining us right here on Unity 979, Worcester's Community Connection.
Unity Radio. Worcester, We've got you.
How's business?
Good. Are you up to speed with the new beneficial ownership reporting requirements?
Sort of. What's it about?
It's a new initiative to help fight crimes like money laundering, fraud, and drug trafficking. A lot of small businesses like ours just have to report some basic info to the federal government about the real people behind them.
Reporting your company's beneficial ownership information is quick, secure, and free, and it helps protect U.S. national security. Learn more at fincen.gov/BOI.
Hi, I'm Ernie Floyd, host of the Unity in the Community Show on Unity Radio 97.9. Join me and my guest as we discuss topics on embracing our diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. I'm Ernie Floyd, host of the Unity in the Community Show, Wednesdays at 3 p.m. on Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester's Community Connection.
Looking for a meaningful way to engage with members of your community and make a difference? Volunteer with the Massachusetts Senior Medicare Patrol Program and help prevent Medicare fraud. SMP volunteers work in their community, educating their peers about how to prevent, detect, and report healthcare errors, fraud, and abuse. Visit our volunteer open house at masmp.org. Join our team and help us fight fraud. Together, we can make a difference. This project is supported by a grant from the U.S. Administration for Community Living.
Hey, what's up, Worcester? This is Jacqueline Carr, and I'm inviting you to be inspired with me every Sunday starting at 6 a.m. with the Jacqueline Carr Show on Unity Radio. I'll get you going with a motivating word, special guest, the absolute best music, and a few other surprises. But you got to tune in on Sundays at Unity Radio to find out. It's Jacqueline Carr, and the Jacqueline Carr Show is happening Sundays from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. right here on Unity Radio 97.9. Worcester's Community Connection, and also streaming on WUTY.org.
This is Unity Radio 97.9 Worcester.
And once again, welcome back to Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. The Unity in the Community Show embraces the city versus diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. And joining us is the one and only Michael Goldstein, and he's the owner and operator of Empire Loans. And we had him come in because of the fact that there's a method to the madness when it comes to a business and it comes to working with the community. And as we were talking off air a little bit, the fact that you have a strong business, it's economy ran in a sense, and at the same time, it's education's involved, marketing's involved, of course, and there's an exchange of goods and there's a product. And in that education, sometimes the customer may think that their product is more than what it's really worth, and you have to educate them and let them know that it's not as much as you think it is, but you have to say it in a certain way so you're not disrespecting that person.
Absolutely. The key with jewelry mostly is that, jewelry is not, there's no standard for jewelry as far as pricing goes. And what I mean by that is, depending on where you're buying a piece of jewelry, generally speaking, the price range could be dramatic. So as I was saying off air, if you buy a particular item of jewelry on Fifth Avenue in New York, you're going to pay more. Just without any doubt, you're going to pay more because their customers, generally speaking, have more money and they're going to market to the customer with more money. That same exact item, if you buy it in a competitive jeweler's exchange, for instance, like the Jewelers Building in Boston, you're just going to pay less. So there's not, as we were talking about, it's not like buying a car. And as I said, a Toyota Camry in Los Angeles will be approximately the same price as a Toyota Camry in Massachusetts with certain state things, but it's not like in Los Angeles, it's going to be $100,000 and in Boston, it's $35,000. It just doesn't work that way. Jewelry is different. So when somebody comes in and I can offer them a certain amount of money, but they paid significantly more, I have to explain that we're loaning based on the intrinsic value. And the intrinsic value is the exact dollar amount that I know that I can scrap the item for, even though I may not scrap it, but that's the bottom line. If I know that this ring at a refiner is going to get me, let's say $100, I'm going to loan you $70. Now that customer might have spent $300 for that, but that value isn't as important to me as what the intrinsic value is. And it's the same thing with diamonds. Now diamonds are in a great deal of trouble right now because of lab created diamonds, but putting that aside, diamonds also had a certain market, and we knew what the secondhand market was on it, and we would loan a percentage of that.
And I think what's funny that you're explaining what you're explaining as far as the education goes behind the whole thing. But one thing I think everybody knows is when it comes to, if you want to equate that when it comes to a vehicle, everybody knows that if you spend 40,000, 60,000, whatever the amount on a vehicle, that as soon as you drive it off the lot, that thing drops like a lead balloon, you know, and people agree with it, and they're okay with it, especially if you go back and you want to trade it in for another car or something like that. They're not going to squabble. They know that. But when it comes to gold or jewelry and some other items in the business that you're in, they're going to fight a little bit more and hang on a little bit longer and try to justify why they should deserve, or why they deserve more money from their product.
And jewelry is an emotional purchase. Cars generally aren't emotional. That certainly people love their cars, but when you're buying a piece of jewelry, especially if it's an engagement ring or something that has, you know, you're going to give as a gift, there's an emotional quality to that. And frequently jewelry salesmen are good at what they do. I'm not saying that they're being deceptive at all, but they show you beautiful items, and they give you pricing, and, you know, they often equate it to how many cups of coffee, you know, a day or a week for your engagement ring. So, you know, I get it, but that's where the education comes in. And I always want to stress with my customers, you know, it's a formula. You know, we throw it on a scale. It's based on, you know, the price of gold, and it's nothing personal. It's definitely not personal.
Right. So you decide to go into the business. And then as you go into the business, as I said earlier, you have a formula when it comes to stocking the store and starting and opening up the door. What is the nature of the items? Kind of like we'll say like a Walmart. Walmart has clothes, and they have food, and they have all these different items, and, you know, sporting goods, so forth and so on. What's the makeup if you want to start the pawn shop?
Well, of course, it's changed in 40 years, but it still is predominantly jewelry here in the Northeast. Okay. So different parts of the country have different pawn shop needs and pawn shop items available. So, for instance, in the South, a big collateral base in the South and the Southwest are guns. Now, we don't do any guns in the Northeast. That includes Boston, Philadelphia, New York. They don't do guns. Down South, big part of their collateral base is guns. So when you walk into a pawn shop, you will see walls of used guns for sale. They're highly regulated. They follow every single important law. Well, not every law can pertain to guns. We wouldn't do guns even if we were allowed to. I happen to not be someone who's a gun enthusiast at all. So that wouldn't be a collateral base for us. But as it turns out, in the Northeast, we don't really need that as a base. Also down South, where land is cheaper and pawn shops are bigger, they'll take in lawnmowers. They take in, you know, they actually will take in tractors, farm equipment, because they have areas in the back where they can store it. Where the Northeast and California, like the major urban centers, it's still predominantly gold jewelry.
And that's funny because that's the nature, that's the community, that's the nature of the environment. And so you have to know that. So you start at the first store, you're downtown Worcester, and then as you're going along and establishing the business, what made you open up a second, third, fourth, fifth location?
So the first store was Boston in 1985, and it was funny. My dad, you know, loved coming up, and he would, you know, we had fun with my mom and dad. And I called him. Well, let me backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
My first employee was this man, Jeff Keithline, who is retired now, but he's like a brother to me. I've known him now for 40 plus years. He was my first employee. And when Jeff had worked for my competitor back before I started the pawn shop, and my partner at the time said, "Hey, we got to call this guy Jeff." He had left and gone back to Connecticut. He's a musician, and he's a bass player, but he knows musical instruments. He says, "Let's call him, see if he can come work for us." So Jeff comes up to Boston. And at the time I was 24 when we opened, he was 29. And Jeff said, "Sure, I'll come work for you guys as long as you agree when we're ready, you open up another store and you allow me to buy in a certain percentage into the new store." So we looked at him and said, "Sure," you know, shook his hand. Okay. No lawyers, no contracts, sure, no problem. We'll do that. 5 years into the first store, Jeff came to me and said, "What do you think? You think about maybe open up a second store?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it." He lived his family was in Connecticut. He wanted to be a little bit closer. So we went down to Rhode Island. We went to Providence, and we opened up our second store on Broad Street in Providence. And Jeff, we opened up there, and that is our second most successful store It's fantastic. Jeff ran that for a number of years, and he and I together opened up 2 other stores. So Jeff is a partner in the Broad Street store, our New Bedford store, and our North Main Street store. And it's been fantastic. Now, when I told my dad, I'm thinking about opening up a second store. Now, don't forget, my grandfather had run this store since the 40s. Now we're looking in the 80s, 1 store. My dad said, how can you do that? I said, well, what do you mean? He says, well, how can you open up a second store? It was completely anathema to his way of running a store because he was hands-on with everything.
Of course.
And I said, Dad,
Comes with trust too.
comes with trust. And I said, Dad, Jeff is, he knew Jeff at the time. He had been my employee. Jeff is going to run it. He's buying in 25% at a particular price.
Sure.
And we have systems in place. I love Jeff. I trust Jeff, but I'll be there when I need to, and I'll be able to look at numbers. It was an absolute match made in heaven. He really is like a brother to me, but my dad just couldn't understand it.
Mhm.
I was like, well, we're just going to do it.
Well, the thing about it, when you're dealing with precious items and the nature of what
Yeah.
you're doing, once again, Michael Goldstein is joining me. I'm Ernie Floyd. You listen to Unity in the Community on Unity 979. And he owns and operates Empire Loans. You have about, like 5.
There's eight altogether.
Eight locations right
Well,
now.
8 and a vintage guitar store because Jeff, being the musician,
Right,
at some
right.
point said, hey, what do you think about starting a vintage guitar store? I said, sure. And then, that's what we did.
Well, instruments play a huge role
Yeah.
in this nature, in this area, as guns and everything else played a huge role down south, as you just mentioned earlier. So when it comes to the community, you're very particular in reference to how you ran the business. You're very particular on who operates the business. You're very particular in reference to how you address your customers too, as well, because of the nature of the connotation that comes with the pawn shop. So why was it important for you to go with that route as far as addressing people respectfully?
Well, because I felt like it was something I did not see growing up. And if you want to get, I could get personal and talk about my particular philosophy. I grew up, I was born in 1960, so I was very young during the civil rights movement. But a lot of what happened in the civil rights movement, even though I wasn't directly affected by it, it personally affected me. And in my family, I am absolutely known as the far left progressive person. And not that you have to be progressive to be good to your customers. You don't. But I grew up in an environment where, generally speaking, my family was not always that friendly with their customers. I just made it a point. We're not going to do that. We're going to be a different type of pawn shop.
Mhm. It's kind of like a to take it or leave it attitude when it comes to the pawn shop. That stigma. That's like, this is what it is. And it's kind of like you're in power. It's kind of like an empowering
Absolutely.
thing. You came to me and you want me to help you. And if I am going to help you, this is what the guidelines are going to be in reference to helping you. So it's almost like the customer's at the mercy of the store.
And we didn't want them to feel that way.
Mhm.
And I would say to my employees, I say, look, no matter how we slice this, we are the people, we have the power in this interaction. We get to decide what we're going to lend you. The terms are set by the city. That the terms are not negotiable. That's set. But we're not going to make it feel like, oh, you're under our thumb. We're going to try to sell the person on why we're doing what we're doing. The loan is good for 4 months. And this is customary in the Northeast, we give an extra 2 months altogether. But the truth is, even at 6 months, if a customer calls and says, hey, I'm running into some issues. I don't want to sound like I'm patting ourselves on the back, but our culture in my stores is like, we work with a customer. Now, if the customer says, I won't be in for another 8 months, I'm sorry, that parameter doesn't work.
Right.
But you need an extra week, you need an extra 2 weeks. Let's see if we can work with you. And we normally do.
And also with that approach, does that separate you from the other shops that are in New England? Is that something where people, you've heard that feedback?
100%. Especially in the beginning. Less so now, just like capitalism is supposed to work. When we started doing this for the first few years, we got a lot of market share. Now, our competitors, these are not unwise people. They needed to raise their game.
Of course.
And I heard from some of my competitors,
You're too nice.
believe me, I've heard them say that. And I'm like, no problem, but they did raise their game. And we did start to feel like, I don't know if I was responsible for it, but in many ways, the next generation of these pawn shops started to get more in line with treating customers well. And,
And so what we're going to do, we're going to come back as we continue this discussion, Michael Goldstein is joining us here on Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. As you starting to treat the people as people and respectful, then you went above and beyond again, and you created a foundation. So we're going to talk about that foundation when we come back, and the nature of that foundation and how it's helping people in the community. Okay.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
That's good. Once again, this is Ernie Floyd. You listen to Unity in the Community on Unity 979, Worcester's Community Connection.
Unity Radio. Worcester, we've got you.
Support for Unity Radio 97.9 FM is provided by United Way of Central Mass, aiming to improve the community and break the cycle of poverty, and the Woosocks Foundation, seeking to make dreams come true for families in areas of education, social justice, recreation, and conquering cancer. Unity Radio, Worcester's Community Connection.
Tune into The Sustaining Life with Susan Hewlett, and together we will find our way to a healthier, healing lifestyle by listening to empowering stories of overcoming our struggles. Join me, Susan Hewlett, on The Sustaining Life every Wednesday from 5 to 6 on Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester's Community Connection. See you soon.
Over the years, you've brought them into your home. You were prescribed opioids after the C-section and after Dad's back injury. They helped when you were in pain, and you held on to them just in case. But did you know holding on to unused opioids puts your family at risk? Trouble with opioids can start at home with unused medicines, such as pills, patches, and syrups. You can remove the risk and protect your family. Find out how at www.fda.gov/drug disposal.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Myers, your host on Talking Wellness, presented by the Kiva Centers on Unity Radio 97.9 FM. As a licensed mental health professional and leader in the field, I believe every story matters and healing starts with being heard. Whether you're navigating life's challenges or lifting others through theirs, I'm here to explore the paths of mental health, recovery, and wholeness. Tune into Talking Wellness on Unity Radio 97.9 FM every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. for honest conversation and inspiration. This program is sponsored by the Kiva Centers, a statewide leader in peer-led support and recovery services. From Worcester to Western Mass, Kiva is lighting the way forward. Talking Wellness, every voice, every journey. Speak up, be heard, and of course, be well.
You're listening to Unity 97.9 FM, WUTY. Let's talk, Worcester.
And once again, welcome back to Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. The Unity in the Community show embraces the city versus diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. And we're having a unique approach in reference when it comes to the community. We're talking with a business owner and operator in reference to how he treats the people. And that's really important, how you treat the people. It's Michael Goldstein, and he's the owner and operator of Empire Loans, and he's joining us here at Unity Radio. And when it comes to Empire Loans, it was very important for you to treat people to be people versus the stereotypical tradition, which is when you walk into a pawn shop, it's kind of like the attitude in some instances is you take it or leave it. And that made a difference for you. And that's why you were able to grow your business to the point whereas you became reputable about that, and other pawn shops that may not have liked that, what do you mean treating people like people?
Yeah.
And then after that, you decided to go further with the foundation. So tell us about the foundation.
So we started the Empire Loan Charitable Foundation, I believe 14 years ago, 13, 14 years ago. What was happening was, my particular influence over the company was that I wanted each one of the stores, when there was a reasonable nonprofit that came asking for money to help, I said, let's do what we can. And it kind of got a little slipshod. We didn't have like a
standardized format.
Yeah. We wanted to kind of bring it together so that we were all kind of had the same philosophy about who we were
consistent.
So we started this Empire Loan Charitable Foundation, like I said, about 13 or 14 years ago. And we were meeting, and we haven't done this since COVID because COVID kind of disrupted everything.
Of course.
But we were meeting on a fairly regular basis, at least twice a year, just to talk about the different nonprofits in the communities we were at. I am happy to say that in the 14 years that we've started the Empire Loan Charitable Foundation, we have contributed back to the communities that we're at just over $1 million altogether, which for a small company like mine, I'm very proud of. A lot of these bigger companies can do that, with one grant. But we've been involved with the Boys and Girls Club, Girls Inc. We do City Lights, which is a performing arts school in Boston. I can name a bunch. One of my one that I'm very close with is No Books, No Ball in Roxbury, which was started by my dear friend Tony Richards, and I've known him for now 30 plus years. But it was very, very important to me, and luckily the managers that I brought on board and my employees, they really enjoy giving back to the community as well. And we definitely got it was very good for us. I'm going to say that during when George Floyd was murdered, and there was a lot of unrest in a lot of the communities, a lot of my fellow pawnbrokers around the country, not all, but there were many that were vandalized and had some issues around rioting. I cannot say that this is, an absolute result of the Empire Loan Charitable Foundation, but not one of our stores was touched. We have no gates on our stores in Boston. The only store that we have gates on, I think we have but the point is that I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but none of our stores, and there were marches in front of our stores, we were not touched. My competitor in Boston was. Again, I can't say that this was a function, but I'd like to think it helped.
I would like to think too. I think because you set a standard with contrary to the image and the stigma that comes with your business, and that is the fact that you've been in business for a while. And so talking about legacy and generations, the families who borrow from you and purchase from you and everything else that does business with you, they may have had one family member and another family member, another family member, and you made it so that it's as common as walking into Walmart in a sense, and made that stigma comfortable, and personable. So you create the foundation. So give us the nature of the foundation. Obviously, you have a board and you have a director, and how much money can someone borrow from? Grants, apply for a grant.
So we don't have any particular standard, though. I would say that the normal grant from us is somewhere in the $5,000 to $10,000 range. Okay. So these are for smaller nonprofits. We do contribute to the Greater Boston Food Bank. We also do the Rhode Island Food Bank, but generally our grants are $5,000 to $10,000. I think our largest single grant was to the Mattapan Community Health Center, and this is a fantastic organization that for years was operating out of like trucks, mobile trucks. And we wound up making for us a very large donation. It was $100,000. And it was for their dental. They have some dental offices. And that was really important because having grown up in Roxbury, Mattapan is also
Cummings Highway.
Yeah. And the community, the Mattapan Community Health Center is beautiful. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a beautiful building, services, a really large population of people that needed it.
Right. And Mattapan and Roxbury and Dorchester and Morton Street and Blue Hill Ave, obviously they're all dear to me. I have family members stretch them down from there to Eggleston Station to Dudley Station. The whole society, the community has just changed from the overhead train tracks I used to ride on in the Orange Line until they took all the trains down and rerouted everything of that nature. I'm really happy with the fact that as you, not to say that because you're here, but the fact that you have the opportunity to give back to the people in a certain way, not only that you did it in the early process as starting the business, because not too many people think that way in some business. We can't take it for granted that when someone starts the business, they start the business because one, either A, they love what the nature of the business is, and two, they want to make some money.
Yeah.
And not too many people think about, oh, how do we give back to the people in the process of doing that? It's a lot of juggling there.
I wish more small businesses did. I wish that I could convince, and I do talk to some small businesses. I don't do tithing. I'm not a particularly religious person.
Not to interrupt, but it is good business, though.
It is good business, and it's good for market share. Probably, it certainly I think helped us gain market share, but sometimes it's just the right thing to do. Is there a tax benefit? I hear people say, "Oh, this person gave away that money with his tax benefit.
That's not what it's
No,
about,
that's not why people do it.
Right.
So no, it's good. It feels good. It's good for our customers. It's good for the community. And the truth is, Ernie, I know it's going to sound glib, and this would never happen anyway, but I don't need to be the richest guy in the cemetery. That's not valuable to me.
Right.
You know, we're on the planet for a really sliver of time. And yeah, I want my business to be as successful as possible, but I absolutely would not have done this without having some element of it be giving back to the community.
All right. So each store has its own personality.
Yes.
Okay. And now when it comes to Worcester, you're on Southbridge Street. I used to do business with Rotman's down at the end of the street there. We have Rotman's, unfortunately, is no longer, but you're near Holy Cross, College of Holy Cross and Southbridge Street. Give us the personality of the nature of that particular location of Empire Loan.
Well, interestingly, Worcester, when managers talk about the different stores, and we do have people kind of go around, the customers in Worcester are a little tougher to deal with than some of our other stores. I haven't quite been able to figure it out. At first, I thought it must be our people pushing back. But
You're aggressive here, really?
Yeah. Is that, should not be surprised by that, or?
No, I'm just saying in general, they're not personable with you. I would think that with your formula, as you mentioned earlier, that you're personable with them and you're trying to help them. But maybe it's that part of town. Maybe
it could be. Look, I'm not saying that. Look, none of my employees are like.
It's not a science. It could be anything.
Yeah. But generally speaking, there might be a few more upset customers in Worcester than some of our other stores. It does, but nothing, nothing out of the ordinary. It's just, of the stores, our manager Miriam says it's kind of a tough day today. We had 3 customers, but look, as much as we like to really be customer service oriented, the nature of what we do, and I told my employees this in the beginning, I said, look, let's look at what we do. We have people walking into our store that don't have a lot of things. They're about to give us something of value, and we're going to lend them pretty significantly less. Right. And I don't pull any punches. We're going to be charging them a minimum of 36% a year. Winds up being a little bit more than that. This is not a fun experience. We have to understand that.
Yeah, that's true.
But we have to meet people where they are and try to make it as pleasurable an experience as can be.
So it's not like they want to be there, basically.
Exactly.
In a lot of instances. But they convince themselves, or the circumstances lend them the fact that I kind of have to be here. So they're already mad anyway. So you can't take it personal, basically.
We don't. And you should know that it's not like what you see on TV. And what I mean by that is over the years, you see people coming in that are in desperate straits and they're on their last nickel. That's not what it is. It's usually a working person had an unexpected bill come up. They're like, I got to take care of this. So they might pawn the same ring or chain that they pawned 3 months ago. And it's just, people in the, people that are my customers have too much week left at the end of their paycheck. Not all the time, but frequently.
Yeah. Well, the good story comes into the fact that if they can just hang on and you're allowing them to hang on till they get to the sun, until they're able to climb that summit and get to the other side, that's where the good stuff comes in. And that's where you come with the compassion and the understanding. And then they come back and say, something, I just needed that just to get me where I needed to go. You helped me. And I really appreciate that.
Exactly.
Okay. So Michael Goldstein is joining us on Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. And you listen to Unity 979. We're going to come back and continue this discussion on how Empire Loan is making a difference in our community right here in the city of Worcester. On Unity 979, Worcester's Community Connection.
Hello, my name is Pablo Familia, president of the Manny 267 Foundation. And you're listening to Unity Radio, 97.9 FM, Worcester Community Connection.
Hi, I'm Gary. And I'm Steve. And we're the hosts of Cannabis 101 on Unity Radio 97.9 FM.
Join us and our guests on Thursdays at 3 p.m. as we discuss the cannabis industry in Central Mass with energy, excitement, and passion.
We both take pride in providing you important information about the rapid growing cannabis industry. Support for Cannabis 101 is provided by Cannabis of Worcester on Unity Radio 97.9 FM, Worcester's Community Connection.
Hi, I'm Ernie Floyd, host of the Unity in the Community Show on Unity Radio 97.9. Join me and my guest as we discuss topics on embracing our diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. I'm Ernie Floyd, host of the Unity in the Community Show, Wednesdays at 3 p.m. on Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester's Community Connection.
Everyone has a community, a neighborhood, school, kids' teams, where you worship, work out, or any other place or group where you choose to belong. Communities can provide support when you need it, and even when you don't know you do. Like when it comes to preventing underage drinking and other substance use. Community members can be your eyes and ears when you're not with your kids and alert you to signs of potential problems. Learn more at talktheyhearyou.samhsa.gov.
Hello, I'm Pastor Sharon Henderson of Covenant St. Andrew's United Methodist Church, 24 Hamilton Street, Worcester, Mass. We welcome you to worship with us every Sunday at 10 a.m. Let's worship together and love one another. I'm Sharon Henderson, pastor of Covenant St. Andrew's United Methodist Church, 24 Hamilton Street. We welcome you to worship with us at 10 a.m. every Sunday. Let's do it together and let's make peace.
What's up, Central Mass? This is Angelo Gray, and we want to thank you for all your support. And you're listening to Unity Radio 97.9, Worcester's Community Connection.
And once again, welcome back to Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd. The Unity in the Community show embraces the city of Worcester's diverse cultural communities, the music, the arts, and healthy lifestyles. And we're speaking with Michael Goldstein. He's a husband, he's a father, he's a lifelong Boston business person with 4 decades of stories, insight, perspectives, in reference to how money moves and what it means for the real people. And that's what you shared with us. And speaking of people, one of the opportunities you had was the fact that you mentioned about instruments, okay? And then someone came in one day and said, I got to buy an instrument from you, and they're like, let's call this the least expensive one that you have there, and tell us about that story.
Yeah. So last year during the playoffs run with the Patriots, it was the day of one of the games. I don't remember exactly which one. It was one of the playoff games, and a guy comes into the store and he says, I need to buy a guitar. I just want the cheapest guitar he had. So one of my salespeople said, sure, I showed him whatever the cheapest one was. I don't know what it was. Sold it to him. I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm a producer. I don't remember what network he was with, but they had the game. And he told us that Gronk is going to be there doing some stuff. And then at halftime, he's going to be going up on stage with whatever band was playing there. And they needed to have a guitar that Gronk could smash.
Okay.
So I was like, oh my God, that's fantastic.
Not the band's guitar, of course.
Not the band's, right. Because those are expensive guitars. So that's what happened. And we've got it, we recorded it. And it's kind of like this goofy thing that we see Gronk doing something, all of a sudden he smashes the guitar. That was an Empire Loan guitar.
Well, it's good to have some humor behind this whole
Sure.
thing. Once again, Michael Goldstein is joining us, and he's with Empire Loan. And I never thought that you can combine Empire Loan, a business of the nature that you have, with the community. And it all started with you because of the fact that you have compassion. And that's what it comes with. And that's just the nature of what businesses should have, I think, as a platform initially anyways, not just have because I think initially everyone has this great idea to start a business, and then they feel warm and fuzzy about it. And in some instances, it turns.
Yeah.
Some way, somehow, where all of a sudden the money starts to rule, and they want to go after the money, regardless of whoever is the purchaser. And that could be a problem sometimes for some businesses, because you can tell who has the longevity, in some instances, who's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, there's something that is good for the soul, not only for the owner of the company, but for my employees. It just feels good. It's almost like, you talk about altruism. And sometimes, even though it is technically altruism, I'm really getting a benefit from it. Like it feels good. So it's not selfless, if you know what I mean.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's kind of like saying, I can sleep at night.
Yeah.
In a sense like that. So where's Empire Loan going in the future now? You have about 8 locations, you said, right?
We have 8 locations and an incredible vintage guitar store down in Rhode Island. So, I'm approaching an age where I have to start to consider, retiring. I'm not, knock on wood, I'm in very good health. But the road ahead, I don't know. I do have a daughter that has expressed an interest in possibly continuing
That'd be
in the
nice.
tradition. It could be. It could be. But it may also be something that, we may need to sell the entire chain. We're not sure right now. It's kind of up there. I've got time. It's probably a 5-year plan before I actually make a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it could become sooner depending upon if someone comes along and says, hey, by the way, some major chain across the country or whatever case may be may come up and say, hey, we're interested in coming into the Northeast, as they would say,
You're right.
into the eastern part. Let's have a conversation. And of course, you have a conversation to see what
It
that's
is
all
conceivable.
about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'd like to go back to the foundation again. How can people apply to your foundation when it comes to Worcester, and how far do you go outside of Worcester as far as what your store is in the area where people can apply for your
So
to the foundation?
we don't have an absolute firm application process. We do meet now by Zoom periodically, and each store will tell me what nonprofit they've looked into. So we don't have an application process. We do have our charities. You know what happens with foundations like ours, you have your nonprofits that you tend to do year after year. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't expand, but there's not a formal application process.
All right. So not having the formal, how can people get in contact with the foundation? How's that?
Go to empirelone.com. There is a foundation button. You can click on that. It will talk about the different things that we do, and they can just reach out on the number that's there. They'll get in touch with my marketing person, and then they can send us information. And we're always happy to look at information to see if it's something that we can help with. We tend to like nonprofits that are in the food insecurity segment and children and arts. So we do the basketball thing. We do have city lights. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't consider something else. But for instance, just off the top of my head, a veterans nonprofit, love veterans, understand the need there. Isn't something that we've done in the past. We tend to be more food insecurity and children related type of nonprofits.
Do you kind of like promote it in some sense separately from the store sometimes, or it's just embedded there and it's just associated with the business?
It's more that it's just embedded there, associated with the business. We don't do a lot of promotion around it. We have our different signage up in the store of the organizations that we've helped, but we don't do a lot of particular marketing around the foundation.
So each community has a certain, would say, feel or appeal of the different agencies that come through your stores or the different 8 locations. Do you find yourself, okay, in Stoughton, we seem as though we get this. In Worcester, we seem as though we get this type of person coming in for donations. Each one has its own character, or they pretty much are all the same?
It's fairly similar. We just did something with a mentorship program in Stoughton, and that was my manager, Les, Russ, who came to me and said, there's this great organization, and he showed it to me. And I said, Russ, I'm going to go with your gut. Is that something you want to do? He said, yes. So we helped them out down in Rhode Island. There was a benefit. It was food, but there was another, it was the Trinity Square Association, which was a neighborhood organization that one of my managers said, I think this feeds in really nice with what we do. So it's kind of a little, I don't want to say it's loosey-goosey, but I rely on my managers to put in front of me and the board nonprofits that make sense for our particular philosophy.
Yeah. I'd be remiss not to mention Allison.
Yes.
All right.
The boss, the real boss.
The real podcast, and the nature of the Lenny Zakem Foundation. Yeah. And it's kind of like almost similar in nature of the spirit of the family there. That's your wife. She operates the Lenny Zakem Foundation in Boston. And kind of like the same spirit at the household, whereas that foundation in particular, how it shares and experience the fact that it gives to a number of different agencies, similar in nature in how your foundation does.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you brought it up. Of course, Allison is the executive director of the Lenny Zakem Fund, and they help fund smaller nonprofits. I think their budgets have to be less than 350, but don't quote me on that, 350,000. And Allison has brought really good nonprofits to us as well. She might see a nonprofit that doesn't fit their particular criteria and say, hey, in New Bedford, this was a perfect example. My Brother's Table in New Bedford, that I think they funded 1 or 2 years and then said, we're doing something else, but I was introduced to it, went down. They do incredible work down there. And that's again, food insecurity. And so yeah, she has brought many nonprofits to me and they're always right on.
And the reason why I brought that up is because of the fact, one, because we're sponsored by them as well. Pride Productions is a parent company of Unity Radio. And I'm just amazed and pleased about the fact that there is some goodness with all the stuff that's going on, and not to get soupy here around the country, because of the fact that people are still giving, and there are people out there that still give, people that still care, and people out there that are trying to make a difference.
I agree, but I'm sure you would agree that I'm nervous about where the country's going. I'm nervous about our political leadership to put it lightly. But I think it's going to have a long-term, unfortunate negative influence on our country and the nature of philanthropy. When you have someone in power that really is only, in my opinion, concerned with enriching himself and his family and the people around him, and some of the stuff, not all of the stuff, I should say, he's done internationally, forgetting about the war, but the stuff that he's done with the projects that he's cut, it doesn't bode well. And I hope that we can survive what he's doing and move back to back to a time when people think about philanthropy and just helping. That, it's not only money. Plenty of people don't have enough money to give financially, but there's time, there's experience, and I hope we get back to that in this country.
I find it interesting the fact that everyone knows what his makeup is and where he came from. It's just incredible how he was able to continue to go down that path and travel and get to the highest position in the world and the country when it comes to America, and still can do it, but now still doing it, the nature of what he was doing on a smaller scale, but now he's doing it on a global scale.
Yeah.
And it's taking a lot of people down. And I don't understand how someone who was doing what they're doing will lessen the defenses as well. If I'm going to be something in my community, I would strengthen my defenses. I wouldn't lower my defenses as far as protection goes. If I know I'm going to go out and if I know I'm going to take advantage of somebody, I at least think I would protect the house. And I don't know. I don't know if something's going to fly in here or fly anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't want to wait till that happens before all of a sudden everyone starts to jump in and starts trying to make a difference. Say, okay, enough is enough. Let's try to say and do enough is enough right now before it gets to that situation.
I agree. Look, you and I would agree 100%. It's remarkable and depressing to me that there is food insecurity. There are children, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, parts of Worcester, New Bedford, that are arts, short on arts, right? Because they're being cut from the schools.
Sure.
But the food insecurity in the absolute richest nation in the history of mankind is unforgivable. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you in the nature of that. Thank you for joining, sharing your thoughts and your compassion with us, and also about the business, about Empire Loan. I didn't know that, the background of it. Obviously, when you say Empire Loan and people are familiar with the businesses, they see it on the surface, but you really have to go inside. You really have to meet the people to see the other side in reference to how you treat the people. And I really appreciate you,
Thank you, Ernie. It was
sharing
my
that story
pleasure.
with us. Okay?
Thank you.
Michael Goldstein is with us right here on Unity in the Community. I'm Ernie Floyd, and thank you for joining us. As you've been listening to Unity 979, Worcester's Community Connection.
Thank you.